I never imagined love would come with a price tag. When I proposed to Clara, I thought the hardest part was over, that she'd say yes, we'd plan a wedding, and start building a life together. But I was wrong. The real challenge wasn't the proposal. It was her father. Mr. Hayes was the kind of man who carried his authority like a weapon. Broad-shouldered, sharp eyes, a voice that could silence a room with just a few words. He'd built his reputation on discipline, tradition, and control, and everyone in his family orbited around him like planets around the sun. Clara had warned me. "My dad's intense," she'd said, her voice trailing off. But I didn't think much of it. I figured he'd warm up once he saw how much I loved his daughter. The night I asked for his blessing, I showed up at their family's house in a navy blazer, polished shoes, and my most careful smile. Clara held my hand under the table, giving me courage. Her mother served roast beef and wine, her younger brother scrolled on his phone, and Mr. Hayes sat at the head of the table like a king on his throne. I cleared my throat. "Sir, I love your daughter. I want to marry her, and I'd be honored to have your blessing." The room went still. Even the clink of cutlery stopped. Clara squeezed my hand, her eyes hopeful. Her mother gave a small, polite smile. But Mr. Hayes didn't smile. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and studied me with an expression that made me feel like I was being weighed and measured. Finally, he said it. The words that turned a simple dinner into the beginning of a nightmare. "If you want to marry my daughter, you'll need to prove you can take care of her. Start by paying off our family's debt." At first, I thought I misheard. The silence stretched so long that Clara's fork slipped from her hand and clattered onto her plate. I stared at her father, waiting for a laugh, a wink, some sign that this was a test or a joke. But his eyes were stone. "Excuse me?" I asked carefully. "You heard me," he said. "We've got obligations, loans, bills. If you can't step up for that, how can you expect to provide for my daughter?" Clara's face drained of color. "Dad, that's not." But he cut her off with a raised hand. "This is my condition. No debt cleared, no blessing. Simple as that." My chest tightened. The roast beef on my plate suddenly tasted like ash. I didn't know whether to laugh in disbelief or walk out the door. Instead, I sat there frozen, realizing that my love story had just been hijacked by an ultimatum I never saw coming. The drive home that night felt like a blur. Clara sat beside me, silent, her hands twisting in her lap. The headlights cut through the darkness, but nothing could cut through the heaviness in my chest. "Did that really just happen?" I finally asked, my voice low, half hoping she'd say I imagined it. She let out a shaky sigh. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know he'd go that far." "Clara, he basically asked me to buy your hand in marriage," I said, gripping the wheel tighter. "Does he think this is the 1800s? She flinched, tears gathering in her eyes. "Please don't hate him. He's old-fashioned, controlling. He thinks he's protecting me. But I never thought he'd say something like that out loud." I pulled over to the side of the road, turned to her, and took her hand. "Clara, I love you. But what he's asking, it's insane. How much debt are we even talking about?" Her silence told me everything before her words did. She bit her lip and whispered, 50,000, maybe more. He's been hiding how bad it is." My stomach dropped. 50,000? That wasn't a debt. That was a trap. "Clara," I said slowly, "that's not my responsibility. I want to marry you, not buy my way into your family." She nodded quickly, desperate. I know. I don't expect you to." I never would. I'll talk to him. I'll make him understand. But I could see it in her eyes. The fear, the helplessness. She wasn't sure her father could be reasoned with. That night, after I dropped her off, I sat alone in my apartment staring at the ceiling. I thought of the future I'd dreamed of with Clara, the home we'd build, the laughter we'd share, the children we might raise. And then I thought of Mr. Hayes's cold stare across the dinner table. His words echoed in my mind like a sentence carved in stone. No debt cleared, no blessing. I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. The next weekend, Clara convinced me to come over again. She said she wanted to talk to her father directly, with me there, so he couldn't twist her words. I agreed, though my stomach was tied in knots the entire drive. When we arrived, Mr. Hayes was already waiting in the living room. He sat in his armchair, posture stiff, a glass of whiskey on the table beside him. Clara's mother hovered nervously nearby, clearly aware of the tension but unwilling to step in. "Dad," Clara began, her voice firm but trembling at the edges. "What you said to Ryan the other night, it wasn't fair. He loves me. He shouldn't have to prove anything by paying off our debt." Her father's jaw tightened. He didn't look at her. He looked straight at me. "You think love is enough? Love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't keep a roof over your head. A man who wants to marry my daughter should be prepared to shoulder responsibility." I clenched my fists, but kept my tone steady. "With all due respect, sir, I take responsibility for my own life. I pay my bills. I have a stable job. What you're asking, it's not responsibility. It's extortion." His eyes narrowed. "Careful with your words, son." Clara stepped between us. "Dad, stop. You're treating him like some transaction. He's not here to buy me. He's here because we love each other." For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Then Mr. Hayes leaned forward, his voice dropping low. "Clara, if he won't do this, then I can't give him my blessing. And if you marry him without it, don't expect me to walk you down the aisle." The air went heavy, suffocating. Clara's face crumpled, torn between fury and heartbreak. I felt something inside me snap. I stood, forcing my voice to stay calm even as my pulse hammered in my ears. "Then maybe I don't need your blessing." His glare was ice cold. "Then you don't need my daughter." The words landed like a slap. Clara gasped, covering her mouth. Her mother whispered his name, horrified. But he didn't take it back. In that moment, I realized, this wasn't just about money. This was about control. Clara and I left the house in silence. She was shaking, her nails digging into her palms as we walked to the car. I wanted to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay, but the truth weighed too heavily between us. Once we were inside, she broke down. "I can't believe he said that," she whispered through tears. "Like I'm some prize he can withhold until you pay him off." I wrapped my arms around her. "Clara, listen to me. None of this changes how I feel about you. But your dad, he's not just stubborn. He's trying to control both of us." She nodded miserably. "He's always been this way. With me, with my mom, with everyone. But I never thought he'd use money to decide if I can be happy." Her phone buzzed in her lap. A text from her father. 3 words that turned her pale. "Think carefully, Clara." She shoved the phone away as if it burned. I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. "This isn't love," I muttered. "This is blackmail." That night, we sat in my apartment, trying to make sense of it all. Clara admitted things I hadn't known, Her dad had taken out risky loans for his failing business. Her mom had begged him to cut back, but he doubled down, convinced he could turn things around. Instead, the debt piled higher. And now, he saw me as the solution. "Ryan," Clara whispered, her eyes swollen from crying, "I don't care about the debt. I don't care if he refuses to walk me down the aisle. I just want you." Her words should have comforted me. But deep inside, a question gnawed at me. If I married her, would I ever be free of her father's demands? As if to answer me, another text buzzed on Clara's phone. This time, she showed me. "If Ryan's serious, he'll prove it. 50,000 isn't that much for a lifetime with my daughter." My blood ran cold. He wasn't backing down. He was doubling down. And I realized, this fight was only just beginning. The following week, I couldn't focus at work. Numbers blurred on my screen, phone calls felt like static, and every quiet moment was filled with Mr. Hayes's voice echoing in my head. 50,000 isn't that much for a lifetime with my daughter. It wasn't just the audacity of the demand. It was the way he said it, like Clara was a commodity and I was the highest bidder. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. By Wednesday, Clara called me at lunch. Her voice was soft, hesitant. "He wants to see you again." I nearly dropped my sandwich. "What? After all that?" She hesitated. "He said he wants to make things clear." I laughed bitterly. He already made it crystal clear. But when I heard the desperation in her voice, I knew I couldn't refuse. Not for her. So Friday evening, I found myself back at the Hayes house, sitting stiffly across from the man who wanted to auction off my future. Mr. Hayes wasted no time. "Ryan, I'll be blunt. You want to marry my daughter? Then step up. A real man protects not just his wife, but her family. That's tradition." Tradition. I shot back. Since when does tradition mean covering someone else's reckless choices? His jaw tightened. "Careful." "No," I said firmly. "You want me to pay off your mistakes. You want me to rescue you from debt and call it love. That's not tradition. That's manipulation." The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. Clara's mother sat rigid on the couch, wringing her hands. Clara herself sat beside me, tears brimming but unfallen. Then Mr. Hayes leaned forward, voice low and menacing. "If you won't do it, someone else will. Clara deserves stability. If you can't provide it, maybe you're not the man I thought you were." I felt my pulse spike. "And maybe you're not the father Clara deserves." The room froze. Clara gasped. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. For the first time since I'd met him, Mr. Hayes actually looked rattled. His face flushed red, and for a moment, I thought he might lunge at me. But instead he stood, straightened his jacket, and said coldly, "Then you are not welcome in my house." Clara grabbed my hand. "Then we'll leave together." And we did. But as the door slammed behind us, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the start of a war. That night, Clara stayed at my apartment. She tried to be strong, but I could see the guilt tearing her apart. She curled up on the couch, knees to her chest, and whispered, "I feel like I'm choosing between you and my family." I sat beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "Clara, this isn't your fault. Your father is the one creating this choice, not you. You don't have to carry his mistakes." But she shook her head, eyes wet. "You don't understand. My dad's always been like this. Controlling. Demanding. I used to think it was just his way of protecting me. But now? It feels like he's testing how much he can get away with." Her words sank deep. Because I'd been thinking the same thing. This wasn't just about money, it was about control. And if I gave in now, I'd be setting the tone for the rest of our marriage. The next morning, I woke up to a storm of messages. Not from Clara, not from her mother, but from her father. The first text, "You're tearing this family apart." The second, "Do you even love my daughter, or are you just cheap?" And the last one, the one that made my blood boil. "If you can't pay now, what happens when she really needs something? Are you going to let her suffer then too?" Clara saw the messages and broke down again. "He's trying to make you the villain." I clenched my jaw. No. He's making himself the villain. And if he thinks he can guilt me into writing him a check, he's about to learn who I really am. That evening, we met Clara's mother in secret at a coffee shop downtown. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hands shaking as she stirred her tea. "Please don't hate him," she whispered. "He's desperate. The debts are worse than he let on. He thinks if you help, it will save his pride." I stared at her. Save his pride? By sacrificing my future? My marriage? Her silence was the only answer I needed. And in that silence, I realized something chilling. If I didn't put a stop to this now, Mr. Hayes would never stop testing me. Not at the wedding. Not in our marriage. Not ever. By the following week, the whispers had spread. Clara's cousins were suddenly concerned about whether I could provide. Her uncle made a snide comment about how some men just aren't ready to step up. I didn't need to ask where it came from. Mr. Hayes was poisoning the well, painting me as weak and unreliable, all because I refused to pay his debt. Clara confronted him over the phone one night. I could hear her through the thin walls of my apartment, her voice breaking with anger. "Dad, stop telling people Ryan isn't good enough. He's the only one who's treated me with respect. Why can't you see that?" His reply was so loud I could hear it without being on the call. "Respect doesn't put food on the table. He's a man with pride but no backbone. If he cared about you, he'd prove it." Clara hung up on him, shaking with fury. She collapsed into my arms and whispered, "It's like he wants me to choose between us." And maybe that was exactly what he wanted. A few days later, an invitation arrived in our mailbox. It was for Clara's cousin's engagement party, hosted, of course, by her father. Clara stared at it, torn. If we don't go, he'll say we're avoiding him. If we do go, it'll be a battlefield. I thought about it, then nodded. Then let's go. I'm done letting him control the narrative. If he wants a scene, we'll give him one. The night of the party, we walked into the banquet hall hand in hand. I wore my best suit, Clara looked stunning in a silver dress, and for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, we could get through the night without fireworks. But the moment Mr. Hayes saw us, his lips curled into that same cold smile I'd seen at his dinner table. He raised his glass and, loud enough for everyone to hear, said, "Well, well, the man who thinks love is worth more than responsibility. Tell me, Ryan, have you reconsidered my offer? Or are you still too proud to do what's necessary?" The entire room fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned to me. Clara's grip on my hand tightened until it hurt. And in that charged, suffocating silence, I realized I had a choice. Back down in front of everyone, or finally stand up to him once and for all. Every eye in the room was on me. I felt the heat of their stares, the anticipation buzzing like static in the air. Mr. Hayes stood there smug, swirling the amber in his glass, certain he'd cornered me. I stepped forward, my voice steady but carrying across the hall. "You're right about one thing, sir. Love is worth more than responsibility, because love creates responsibility. Real responsibility. Not the kind where you dump your failures on someone else and call it tradition. A murmur rippled through the guests. Clara's mother dropped her gaze, shame flickering across her face. Clara's father stiffened, his smug smile slipping. "You dare speak to me like that?" he growled. "Yes," I said firmly, locking eyes with him. "Because what you're doing isn't protecting Clara. It's punishing her. You're using her happiness as leverage to fix your mistakes. And let me make this clear, I will never, never pay for your debts just to earn the right to marry your daughter. She is not for sale." Gasps echoed around the room. Clara squeezed my hand, tears brimming in her eyes, not from sadness, but pride. Her father's face turned crimson. "You insolent!" But before he could finish, Clara stepped forward, her voice cutting like glass. "Enough, Dad." The room went dead silent again. She turned to the guests, her chin trembling but her words sharp. "You all want to know the truth? Fine. My father is drowning in debt because he gambled away his business and pride. And instead of fixing it himself, he's trying to force Ryan to bail him out. That's the kind of responsibility he's preaching tonight." The whispers turned to open stares. Some guests looked stunned, others disgusted. Mr. Hayes's jaw dropped, then clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. "Clara," he hissed, his voice shaking with rage. "How dare you humiliate me in front of everyone?" She lifted her chin, standing taller than I'd ever seen her. "How dare you try to sell my future for your pride?" The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was liberating. For the first time, the grip her father held over her was breaking. And I knew then, the war wasn't just mine anymore. Clara had chosen her side. The party unraveled after Clara's words. Conversations stopped. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some whispering to each other, others staring openly at Mr. Hayes, waiting to see what he'd do. His face was a mask of fury. He slammed his glass down so hard the whiskey splashed over the tablecloth. "You've disgraced me," he hissed at Clara. "Both of you. Do you have any idea what you've done tonight?" Clara didn't flinch. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I stopped letting you control me." Her mother rushed over, grabbing Clara's arm. "Please, not here," she whispered urgently, eyes darting around the room. But it was too late. The damage was done. Mr. Hayes's brother, who'd been sitting near the back, stood slowly. "Maybe it's time someone said it, George," he muttered. "You've been lording over this family for years. Maybe the problem isn't Ryan. Maybe it's you." The room buzzed with shock. Clara's father looked like he'd been slapped. His authority, the armor he wore so confidently, was cracking in front of everyone. Clara tugged on my hand. "Let's go," she whispered. And we did. We walked out, leaving behind the stunned silence, the whispers, and the man who had just lost his grip on everything. In the car, Clara leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I thought I'd feel guilty, but I don't. I feel free." I kissed the top of her head, relief flooding me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. A man like George Hayes didn't just let go. He'd come back, angrier, more desperate, more dangerous. Sure enough, 2 nights later, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, his voice came through, low and venomous. "You think you've won? You embarrassed me in front of my family. But mark my words, boy, you'll regret this. If you don't pay up, I'll make sure your life is hell." And then he hung up. I sat there in the dark, phone pressed against my ear, heart pounding. This wasn't just about marriage anymore. It was about war. The morning after his threat, I woke to dozens of missed calls. Some from Clara, some from unknown numbers. My inbox was flooded with messages, rumors, half-truths, and outright lies about me. It didn't take long to figure out who was behind it. Mr. Hayes had declared war in the only way he knew how, by trying to ruin me. He called my boss, claiming I was unstable. He told Clara's extended family I was only after her money. He even spread whispers that I had debts of my own. It was desperate, ugly, and it reeked of fear. Clara, though, she never wavered. She stood beside me through every rumor, every awkward phone call, every cold shoulder from a relative who believed her father's poison. One evening, when I asked her how she was holding up, she just smiled sadly and said, "If choosing you means losing him, then I've already made my choice." That was the moment I knew we'd be okay. Because while her father was tearing himself apart with pride, Clara and I were building something he could never control. A week later, we met her mother in a quiet cafe. She looked tired, but there was a softness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. She took Clara's hands in hers and whispered, "I'm proud of you. Both of you. Don't let him win." When the wedding day finally came, there was an empty chair at the front where her father should have been. For a moment, Clara's eyes flicked to it, a shadow crossing her face. But then she looked at me, and the shadow disappeared. We said our vows in front of friends who truly cared, family who truly supported us, and when I kissed her, it felt like more than just a wedding. It felt like a victory. As we walked back down the aisle hand in hand, I caught sight of her uncle, the one who had spoken up at the engagement party. He gave me a firm nod, like he was saying what no one else dared, "You did the right thing." And in that moment, I realized something important. Love doesn't need permission. It doesn't need a blessing that comes with conditions or a price tag. Love proves itself, not with money, but with loyalty, courage, and the willingness to fight for each other. Mr. Hayes lost his power that day. And Clara and I gained our freedom. Forever.